Good evening. Welcome to Prayer Warrior Week 5 class discussion. We are reading tonight from a Joel S. Goldsmith book, The Language of Spiritual Healing, and it's page 55. He writes, "As long as disease is a reality to you, as long as you believe that fevers must run their course, or that they must be brought down, or that tumors must be reduced, or as long as you believe that the disease must follow some kind of a physical pattern, you're not in spiritual healing, even though to some extent the spirit may have been brought into the picture. Complete total spiritual healing is the non-recognition of the reality of the condition. It is a state of your consciousness, or mine, or the practitioner's consciousness, in which God is so real, and the works of God, the Word of God, the universe of God, and the man of God are so real that it is fantastic to believe that such a thing as disease of any kind could exist in God's universe. The successful healing ministry is based, first of all, on the reality of God and the reality of God's creation, whether appearing as man, body, or universe. And in the second place, on the realization of the unreal nature of what is presenting itself to us as a sick or sinning person, as disease, or as undesirable habits. Let us understand the correct meaning of the term real and unreal, their meaning in a spiritual sense. In other words, realize that whatever you behold through the physical senses is but a mirage, which can be likened to the water on the desert. When you are able to do this, you will immediately translate illness into health. In fact, when you begin to discern spiritually, you will see something in everything around you. In flowers, clouds, stars, sunsets, sunrises, something greater than the human mind can grasp. Behind every externalized form, there is always more than the human mind or eye can comprehend. When you see with spiritual vision, you behold the man God made in his image and likeness. And it is this ability to discern reality which brings out healing." And so with that, let us close our eyes and come into some stillness and silence together. Just a few moments, maybe a minute or three, and then I'll speak a 6-step affirmative prayer treatment for all of our consciousness. How grateful I am to be together right here, right now, with these like-minded individuals. I am so grateful for the technology and for the calling that is in our heart that would have us find each other like this, to have this high time together, a high conversation, a high 2 hours of cognition, of remembering, of recognizing, of recognizing, cognition, knowing, recapitulation, opening, a consciousness, awakening to this consciousness that is the only thing that is, this fundamental reality, this one source, one power, one force, one activity, one living presence that is the knower and the known and the process of knowing, the space between, the fermion field. It is the unified field of pure potential that just is this single point of singularity, a 10 to the minus 33, an Atman that is in its own nature Brahman and Atman and Brahman and back again. And it is this one living, dynamic, expansive, infinite isness of the absolute living light of eternal I am. And it is good. I know that this life and this force and this source and this Dharma, this living energy, this Shakti, I am presence, it is good. It is life. It is the non-dual good that is the intelligence that is the creator and the creation. It is the speaker and the spoken. It is the living word itself, the frequency that is in all, through all, as all, playing and displaying upon itself at all points of the cosmos, living and loving itself into more and more expression as all that is and ever was will be. It does not contradict itself. It is an absolute perfect wholeness, always, always in its perfect isness. It is the Christ. And this is the truth of my mind. I am one with the mind of Christ. There is one mind. It is the mind of God, and that mind is my mind. And that living light, that I am Christ presence, that universal fractal elegance that is always playing and displaying upon itself, it is the Christ. That is my mind. That is the only reality of me. It doesn't matter what I'm going through. It doesn't matter what emotional content is happening. It doesn't matter what's going on in my physical body or my mental body or the pain body. It doesn't matter what thoughts are firing. There is only one truth about me. I live and move and have my being in God, and nothing has ever harmed or hurt or abandoned or insulted the I am presence that I am. And this is the only truth of me. And if it's true for me, I know it's true for every individual within the sound of my voice. One here. And this living one has fully birthed itself and put these faces on its living givingness, on its living abundance, on its living vitality and radiance, on all that it is. It has moved itself into being and formed itself into the individualized expression of the consciousness of prayer warriors right here, right now, have saying yes. And I know that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter about time and space, these individuals live as the perfect code. One in God is the majority, regardless of whatever is happening in the experiential, phenomenal realm. There is one nomina that does not change, and that is the name and the nature of these individuals. These individuals are not their body. They are a living, perfect synastry of individualized expression that has never been hurt, harmed, or endangered. Nothing comes nigh their dwelling place. And it is from this oneness that I realize this word is already spoken. This word is already a law unto itself, that I am the living word, and that the consciousness and the love and the word being spoken as one thing now is the very thing that already was and is for these individuals. Love. Love has had its final sway. It knows absolutely what it's doing in each of their lives, and it is drawing to them their own by divine holy right. It is making every seeming crooked thing straight. And it is lifting them from seeming lack and limitation and separation, fear, doubt, and loneliness into the clarity of the Christ. Only God has causation. We are not moved by the world of appearances and changing phenomena. Only God is real. And this God love moves and demonstrates itself now into their financial bodies, their relationships, their creative expression, their physical bodies shot through with this love, every cell, organ, action, and function renewed now. I'm just so grateful to know that the Christ mind is the mind of love. It is the heart of the I am. That there's nothing anyone has to do or accomplish or know, that it's already established in us. And that this word has been spoken with this authority of the love of the I am. And so I know it is a law and must return fulfilled, outpictured, and demonstrated in ways they can perceive, so that the evidence of a glory to a greater glory is revealed to them now. And so I release this word and I let it be. And so it is. Ashe. So good evening. I just spoke a 6-step affirmative prayer treatment for us using the quality of love. And I argued, I hope you heard that. I tried to put a little extra emphasis on my unification step, because Rev M, if you weren't here earlier, was asking to just for more about unification, which we can talk about tonight. And I'm excited because we have with us Michelle Bourne, ALSP, who co-led the Wholeness and Visitation team with me for from 2009 or 8 for 10 years, I guess. So we're going to talk about how do we prepare our minds so that we aren't the resistance of the demonstration because of our expectation. And how humbling, you know, how humbling it is. Does anybody want to share from the Katie reading? You know, since we're entering now into a conversation where we're talking about, Ernest Holmes was talking about, there's kind of two kinds of prayers. I mean, this is not a conversation that is black and white, but in Ernest's writings, he does present this sort of idea that there's two kinds of ways to do this treatment. And treatment really does come from him. It was originally a 5-step treatment. It came out of Ernest Holmes' teachings. So, and he talks about an argumentative method and a realization method. And we had that reading. And so and then I shared in the lecture that I kind of use both. I use my recognition and unification steps for my realization. That's the realization, guys. You can't have an argument. You can't deny anything and argue error if you aren't completely understanding what you say when you are saying recognition and unification steps. If it's fluffy poetry, then you're standing on fluff. But if it's some real principle there, and you know, there's so many sources to plagiarize now. If you've taken the Principles of Affirmative Prayer series and all the literature I gave you there and all the literature I'm giving you here, there's just so many ways to articulate the non-dual nature of this thing. And really what one of the great teachers, you know, Joel says is that we just are not going to get in the ring with it. We're not getting in the ring with using our understanding of God as power to overcome another power. That's not what we're doing. And so you'll have another reading this week that talks a little bit more about some of that. But let's turn to the Katie and share for a minute about this. Does anybody have any questions about the reading? And I can pull it up on a PowerPoint if we want to see it collectively. Let me know. Michelle is nodding her head. Okay. That means I won't, you need to just unmute yourselves and or Geraldine can moderate. But I won't be able to see any hands raised and stuff.
I think for me, I was just going to say, you know, it's that like the 4 common error thoughts, right? And then putting those together. So there is no evil, there is no absence of life, substance, or intelligence anywhere. Pain, sickness, poverty, old age, and death cannot master me, for they are not real. And there is nothing in all the universe for me to fear, for greater is He that is within me than that is in the world, right? So that was very powerful.
Yeah, beautiful. And you know, you have, look, guys, for me, it's important that you understand if you're thinking about being in the, who's thinking about becoming a practitioner? Can I just see hands for a second here? Okay, we got one, one, two, okay, three. All right. Okay. I didn't raise my hand, sorry. Nicole. Okay, good. Yeah. If you're thinking about being a practitioner, it's it's important to make sure you get your vernacular transcended from using any kind of gender when you refer to God. So when you read these old writers, even Ernest Holmes in the beginning was always referring to God as a he, Joel, he, uh, Katie, he, all the unity, he. And they, we always honored it because these writers were writing to deeply, to a Christian nation. There wasn't any other new thought, new age, nothing, the Abraham, God of Abraham was what we were, as he was talking to Christians. So, but over the years, even now, the Centers for Spiritual Living publications, they changed the he to it. And we really do, you really do want to learn how to get out of referring to God as a he. Because a lot of people come to New Thought with a like a spirit, like a religious wound. And if they think there's kind of any kind of God, like if they feel like if it's that God, it triggers something. They actually come for true healing over the concept that they grew up with. And so as practitioners, and especially if they're asking for prayer, you wouldn't, that would be counterproductive if they were listening, and that trigger. But also, as a practitioner, you'll need to expand your cognition from a concept of God as a he to a direct experience of this power and presence that is beyond gender. And I even had this conversation with my mother today. My mother prays to a man, a father. Now she says, I know he's not a man, he's not a personality, blah, 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 but I think of him like a father, and this is what helps her. And you know what? Her prayers work. And when I need prayer, I ask my mother to pray for me. So, this is nothing about being right or wrong or which dogma is right or anything like this. But if you're in the PRAC program, there is a level of consciousness that is expected to be articulated and written about. And you'll need to be able to not go into some default of the he thing or even the she, but so I invite you to challenge yourself to stop doing that. But my mom, in defense of the art, my mom receives tremendous faith and comfort in him. I'm not trying to take anything away from her or take anything away from anybody. But you are taking an affirmative prayer treatment class, which is rooted in a lineage that basically is out of, early Gnostic Christianity, which is, it's very Eastern in its essence. That there's no he and she in God. It's consciousness, and it is everywhere, including you. You are here to actualize. And yes, there are so many archetypes out there. And if something lights you up, I love Shiva. In fact, I was in India. I had a really interesting experience in this ancient Shiva temple. Like clearly I'd been there before. I couldn't stop crying. And it's like, okay, I really appreciated the whole idea of having a relationship with this male essence. I had got, that had gone away when I was about probably 18 or 19. I walked away from the Baptist upbringing and moved into metaphysics and esoteric stuff and all that stuff. It didn't really go away, and the man was still there, but it wasn't until I was 30 that I found New Thought, and then I really understood it. Because Ernest, he does write very well about how it is a principle and other writings. So,
And
yeah.
I would just like to say, when we start genderifying God, especially if we're beginning on this path, where does it place God? In the brain, it's going to place God outside of the one praying. So that removes that unification from there. You know, I know Reverend Victoria's mother quite well, and I know that she has this long developed relationship with the father of her being. So there's no question for her when she says, I know he's not a man, she knows that. So, but when we come into New Thought, we've typically come from another religious background, been wounded in some way. Want to be careful with that he, because that he will always put God outside of the one praying. And we want to speak of it in principle and the eternality that it is to bring it closer to home.
And everything happens in language. The minute you say he, you know what collapses for the listener? The he God. And that's where you're praying from. And now and so they're fitting it all into this. You don't want to fire up that in their, listening either. It all happens in language. So challenge yourself if you find the he happening a lot. I want to point out let's see, just some things in the Katie reading. Let me pull it up. Here it is. I won't be able to see you guys. Let me increase this. Can y'all see that now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's what's really important down here in this little footnote. Whether to accept the reality of something or to deny it is an important issue of great delicacy, and the reader is encouraged to proceed prayerfully. It seems important to acknowledge the appearance of a circumstance, but deny its power over us. Okay, we talked about that last week, right? So, that is what we are going to make sure we are arguing in the prayer, because if we deny that it's happening, we're out of principle. We could offend our listener, especially if they're attached to their condition. Some people actually are. They think they, want something different, but they are arguing for it. Anyway, you you aren't denying the condition. You've got to, when you're saying the prayer, you're denying its power. And Joel talks about that in the reading I'll be handing out this next week. Let's do a group reading here. I want to start at the bottom of this page right here where it says, we have further learned. Do you see where my mouse is? Okay. So, I want to read that
Which
And
page, Reverend
it's the
Victoria?
bottom of page 45,
Okay,
and it's not even the start of that paragraph.
I see it.
It's after the 26-27 numbers. And I
Okay,
want to read the next page, and then I want to read till I think it's different. Hold on. Yeah, till we'll stop on page 49. Okay. Who wants to start? Paragraph.
well, I'll start since I'm already unmuted.
Okay.
And anybody else, go ahead and raise your hand and I'll call on you. So Zara has herself unmuted, so she'll go after me. So you want me to do, how far do you want me to go?
Everybody just read a paragraph, you know.
Okay, all right. All right, so I'm starting at the bottom of page 45.
We have further.
Yes, we have further learned that God is the total of all the good in the universe, and that there is in the mind, which is God, a perpetual desire to pour more of himself, the substance of all good things, through us into visibility and into our lives. And Zara, go ahead.
Surely all these things do not make it look as though when Jesus said that the way to be like him and to possess a like power was to deny oneself, he meant that we are not to go without the enjoyable comforts of life, or in any way deprive or torture ourselves. And
All
then
right.
Josh.
Go ahead, Josh.
In these lessons, we have seen that besides the real innermost self of each of us, the self that is divine self, because it is an expression or pressing out of God into visibility and is always one with the Father, there is a human self, a carnal mind that reports lies from the external world and is not to be relied upon fully.
Okay,
This
pause. I use that in arguments all the time. I will say, you know, that is a carnal, that is I will say that is a lie and a father of lies. I don't deny that it's happening, but I deny its reality. What is true is what is real. It is of the mortal and carnal mind. And that's something I say in the prayer. I've been known to do that. Haven't I, Michelle? Right? I used to. Okay.
All right. There is I'll read it again. There is a human self, a carnal mind that reports lies from the external world and is not to be relied upon fully. This is the self of which Jesus spoke when he said, "Let them deny themselves." Matthew 16:24. This intellectual man, carnal mind, or whatever you choose to call him, is envious and jealous and fretful and sick because he is selfish. The human self seeks its own gratification at the expense, if need be, of someone else. Pass.
Thanks, Josh. All right, Darlene, go ahead.
Your divine self is never sick, never afraid, never selfish. It is the part of you that does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. 1 Corinthians 13:5. It is always seeking to give to others, while the human self is always seeking its own. Heretofore, we have lived more in the human region. We have believed all that the carnal mind has told us, and the consequence is that we have been overwhelmed with all kinds of privation and suffering.
All right. Kara, I believe you're unmuted. I don't see your hand up, but go ahead.
Sure. Sorry, I which paragraph are we on? Because I just
We're at on page 47, the paragraph that starts some people who.
okay. Some people who during the last few years have been making a special study of the mind find it a fact that certain wrong or false beliefs held by us are really the cause of all sorts of trouble, physical, moral, and financial. They have learned that wrong, or as they call them, error beliefs, arise only in the human mind. They have learned that actually proved that we can, by a persistent effort of will, change our beliefs, and by this means alone entirely change our troublesome circumstances and bodily conditions.
Okay, I put a little circle or a little thing around that paragraph and I wrote the word metaphysics. She is describing metaphysics there. Thank you, Kara. Whoever's next.
All right, Vanessa, go ahead.
One of the methods that they have found will work every time in getting rid of troublesome conditions, which are all the result of erroneous thinking and feeling, is to deny them in toto. First, to deny that any such things have or could have power to make us unhappy. Second, to deny that these things do in reality exist at all.
There you go. There's your two arguments. Now, can you, if you're praying for somebody and you get to realization, you can't really be saying, oh, Josh is happy. Okay, that's not in principle. You know, Josh has come to me, he wants something or whatever. He's, you know, I want the prayer to work. I want him to have a positive demonstration. And I'm gonna deny that such things have or could have, you know, power or not power for him to be happy or not. The whole argument is in my head that God is so clear, it's isness in my head. That's what we're arguing against.
I have a question, because, or I'd be interested to hear what you think about this, because my inclination in that situation is to, like during a prayer, is to state a shift in identification, like on behalf of, not the person shift, that I am identifying with Reverend Victoria's divine identity that is beyond physical, beyond mental. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that if you are getting into realization and you're trying to use the prayer or the law or anything to create an effect over there with your client or a patient, you are missing the point.
Right.
You need to go back and go back to the beginning.
Well, I usually say in our oneness,
we are not
but I hear what you're saying.
We are not concerning ourselves with what our perception is over there with them, whether they like the prayer, whether they are going to have a positive response, or whether, you know, we're not. We you know, somebody was asking, a student was asking, no, well, I want my prayer to make them feel better. And it's like, well, yeah, we do. We definitely don't want to hurt them with our prayer. And I think some prayers, I mean, yes, I've actually seen I've seen some wickedness. I've seen people hurt people with prayers. It's terrible, very bad. But we are here to remember we're taking 100% responsibility. So if the prayer request shows up, which is why Hugh Lin would say, don't even come up to me. If the prayer request showed up, then I have to take responsibility for my perception. And really the truth is I'm not concerned about their happiness. My concern is if they're listening to my prayer, my concern is recognition and unification. Because by the time I get to the end of that, my concern is that my physiological state and auric field and the sound carrier wave and the level of height of physiology that that will begin to transmit or maybe infect their spirit a little bit. That could help, and maybe or maybe not. It's not the goal, but if I am truly convicted and my only concern is articulating my understanding of recognition and unification, and I'm embodying and vibrating the quality that is in back of the thing that I am perceiving, which will be unhappiness. She used the word unhappy. And we are talking about this now because our concern for the listener is always going to trip us up. We have to not have that kind of concern, but there are certain concerns we do need to have, like metaphysical abuse and trying to teach in the prayer and trying to, give them ideas and suggestions or a pep talk. That's not a prayer. A big affirmation speech. That's not a prayer. Articulating the principle, denying everything else, from your heart of this quality, whatever that is. We're praying from quality, right? We're not praying for the outline idea of what we think we need them to have so they'll be happy. That's not our concern. Our concern is to know God, pray the quality, and then get out. Right, Michelle? Okay.
Zara has her hand up.
Daria, and then I want to move to Michelle because it's almost 7 and there's so many good stories, and I do want us to exercise a little bit.
Okay,
Zara.
thank you. I was just curious, this Ho'oponopono, which I have been doing myself for years, but you've helped me to adjust anything that needed to adjust. Is there any way to incorporate that into affirmative prayer? So it's like if I say, I recognize that I am mistaken in my thinking, in my perception. I am just so sorry for seeing what I'm seeing. Like, is that appropriate? Not really.
It's not a part of, you can certainly be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Subconsciously,
Mm-hmm.
like that's, if you're doing it subconsciously because
Mm-hmm.
you want to be doing it all the time.
Yeah.
So, but no, that's you trying to do something. If it naturally, I love you, and
Yeah, I guess it's not really.
it's not really part of this.
Keep it separate. So
Yeah.
that's a good way to maybe prepare before affirmative prayer is like, help me, help my mind, help me see properly. I'm sorry, I'm seeing. So it's kind of like, you know what I mean? When he was treating the clients, it's like we could do that even and then affirm.
Yeah, that's I'm certainly personally that is definitely what I'm doing.
Okay.
I'm with everything really, probably, if I'm lucky, if I'm awake, if I'm having a good day, every email, the phone calls, whatever. Because I don't work out in the world like a lot of people have a 9-to-5 job, and they're, I don't have a lot of interaction with people. So
Well, and,
it's
and I would just like to say, Dr. Hugh Lin did not treat clients.
mm-mm.
Did not treat clients. I want to make sure that that's very clear.
Okay. So
Treated his own perception
yes,
of what
thank you
was
for
shown.
that.
That's a huge difference.
Yes,
Huge.
that's,
So I
thank you
really
for
want to
catching
hear
that.
It's he
When he treated his own
perception.
mind. Yeah.
So
And
And that's
that's
what's
the
really
point.
landing. Yeah.
It
That's
is two
the
different
point of-
modalities.
And that's the point
Okay.
of Ho'oponopono. Ho'oponopono is to treat our own mind. So that's something that is like a background tape. It's like white noise that needs to be running all of the time. When you go to the grocery store, when you're getting gas, when you're on the 405, whatever it is you're doing, that's running all of the time in order to wake us up to our own perception. So we're treating our own self with Ho'oponopono.
Okay. Thank you.
Even the affirmative prayer is a spiritual tool using the sound carrier wave, your consciousness and your heart field, to create a demonstration. And, demonstration is a New Thought term. At least it came, we talk about it in New Thought. And there are lots of New Thought teachers, and I've tried to expose you to many. And, as I've kept you, Joel will tell you a demonstration is in the mind. Where God is realized, there is the demonstration. And where is God realized? Not over there on what you're cleaning on. God is realized in you. And theory of forms, Plato's theory of forms, we understand what a form is. We're talking about New Thought and metaphysics. A form is a mold, a mental invisible mold that is created invisible in your consciousness. And it is truth, perfect. When I say apple, a perfect apple. That's the mold. Now we have thousands of apples and rotting apples, and that's matter. But there is a mold that is true and does not change. That is the divine perfect code. And when that mold is your consciousness, whatever it is, your consciousness, you have the mind of God in you. So you have access to every mold, every perfection, all of it. And our job is to know that. Joel would say, well, I'll tell you. And then we're going to have Michelle talk, because she has definitely got stories about, bypassing what our idea of the healing looks like. And I want her to talk about that. Joel says, our devotion is to a God so infinite that besides it, nothing exists to be wiped out or destroyed. Nothing exists which has power to limit, to hinder, or prevent anyone who understands the principle. You have to understand the principle from carrying on any rightful activity, since God in the midst of you is an all-knowing intelligence, a divine love, an infinity of power, the only creative influence or principle in the entire universe. So that's what's being asked of you when you do this argument. It's not learning how to just harness some words. What words can I use for unification? Oh, well, I can give you words. I've given lots and lots of words for you to create unification with. We can practice saying words, and that's what we would do if we were in person. If we have a workshop, we meet in person, we'll do our wheel, we'll practice saying the words. That's what's new to you. It's actually verbalizing them. But you know, your argument is the argument of the non-reality of whatever this is, the pain in my back, bombs falling, whatever. The non-validity, the non-causation of that. Now, if you don't actually know the other part, then it could feel and sound like a spiritual bypass. You have to be able to have clearly articulated your understanding in recognition and unification, so that when they hear you, they know, oh, that's right. That's right. There can't be any other power. Do you hear what I'm saying? Collect the words all day long, but you've got to know. And how are you going to know? Through the devotion. And, I'm very rebellious lately, I will say. The pain body, I'm so rebellious. My practice is, and I'm having to be very nice to myself. I was just talking with Geraldine before class. I'm not going to be mean to myself anymore for not doing this perfectly, but it's okay. I've got enough mystical experiences in me to understand that something wonderful is happening in my life. And this is just like a blip of an integration, and it's going to be something good. But I'm having a really tough time feeling devoted. I'm very rebellious because of the pain. So anyway, I want Michelle to unmute herself. This is Michelle, everybody. And she taught Prac 2 for 7 years. And she led the home and hospital visitation team with me for over 10 years. And she, I have known maybe 4 or 5 healings from patients that she was praying with in that ministry. And there's others too, and she's got even more. And so anyway, she has a wonderful story. I was hoping maybe you would talk about Joan.
Okay.
And all that it means.
So the important thing about this prayer thing that we do is to come to this with a lot of humility. If you think you're going to do something in a prayer, you're not. God does all works. It does all works in through whatever channel. It has nothing to do with myself or anyone else. I don't care how many people are in their congregation. I don't care. That one person, if they're coming to it because they think they're doing something to heal that person of whatever the ailment is, that's the wrong approach. Okay? We come to prayer speaking and articulating the truth that we have embodied on our journey. It's the embodiment of truth and learning how to articulate that embodiment, which is going to be unique to each individual. What I embody is going to be different than what Vanessa embodies and what Joshua embodies. It's going to be different. It's going to come out differently. It's going to look differently. And sometimes, yeah, we fake it till we make it, sit with, you might hear something that Reverend Victoria or Geraldine says. And if it works for you, if it gives you spiritual goosebumps, use it. It's yours. And what's interesting when I've done that is I've watched how they kind of transform into an embodiment that is coming from my understanding through my own devotion. So Joan came along. I came into the One from the Heart ministry very shortly after having a healing of everything that was going on in my body, including childhood pneumonia scars. So I think I took my first class with Reverend Greta Shishida, and shortly thereafter, all of a sudden I was on One from the Heart wholeness and visitation team. And the biggest thing for me in my own healing was that a lot of people will say to me, well, were you trying to get well? Were you trying to heal? And I can honestly say that I was not. I wanted to feel better. Certainly wanted to feel better. I was told to put my affairs in order, and I wanted to feel better. In these teachings, Reverend Michael, Reverend Coco, Reverend Victoria, Reverend Greta, they brought a lot of comfort with where I was on my journey. And so I didn't have, and this is an important part, I didn't have an expectation. And then the healing out pictured, very surprisingly. And that is something that I've held on to, is when I pray, I don't pray with this idea of what it's going to look like for the other person. Because whatever I think, I'm working with this tiny little perception, the tiniest little, if you look up in the sky, see one star that you can barely see, that's my perception. That's what I'm working with. And God's working with everything else. So I'm not going to come into any prayer with an idea of that this is going to happen for this person around whatever the issue is, whether it's health, whether it's abundance, whether it's creative expression or relationship. I don't go into prayer with that. I go into prayer. When someone's talking to me, and I shared this the other night in the Course in Miracles class that I facilitate, I have to learn to walk with a foot in both worlds. Jesus did this very well. Great example. And there are many other great examples. What does that mean? That means I got a foot where I'm going to meet you, but then I've got my foot in truth. That way I could stay anchored, because you don't want me to get in the boat with you. I'm not going to serve you there. Okay. So we learn to walk with a foot in both worlds, so that when someone's in front of us asking for prayer, will you pray for me? We're hearing them, with the human ear, hearing all this story, right? But through our devotion and our practice, we're hearing with something else. We're hearing the wholeness that they are. We're hearing these things, these eternal verities. And then it's through our articulation of that truth that the prayer comes forward. So I don't ever pray with someone for an outcome, for the car, for the job, for the being cancer free. I don't do that. And so I went through the program. I took my time. I think I took it was about 2.5 years worth of foundation classes and then prac studies, and I was in it all the way through. But I really went in, and just gave it everything I had. And so, and during this time, I'm a One from the Heart team leader. And so I'm, not only learning, I'm on this path of becoming a practitioner, I'm also meeting people where they are. And, thank God for Reverend Victoria and Reverend Coco. Couldn't have asked for two greater guides on the journey. So I graduate and go through oral panels, and then I get this case. And practitioner, longtime practitioner, name was
Long time.
long time, like old school, like Ernest Holmes practitioner.
Oh yeah, Science of Mind.
Mhm.
Oh,
And
hardcore.
so I call her, and because the emails, the cases came through email. And so for me, we had a team of 30 to 60 people, and about half of them could do the prayer work, but I would always sit with it for a minute and just, be with the case to see if it was for me, and I generally took on about 6 cases at a time. And I heard.
And wait, a case, let's explain what it looks like to take a case. Like you make a phone call once a week and pray, right?
Once a week for 6 weeks. And then it was up to them if they wanted to come back through. I don't really know what it looked like on Reverend Coco's end, but I made them have to circulate back through the One from the Heart office, because it needed to be them requesting it, not me saying this person needs more prayer. I was never going to do that. I'm like, this is our 6th week. It's been wonderful. Of course, One from the Heart is here for you in the future. And, sometimes they call right away, and, then I get an email from Reverend Coco saying, what's going on with this case? They're looking for prayer. I'm like, I already completed 6 weeks. And so we'd bring them back through again. But it was once a week. And sometimes it included visitations. I did a lot of home, hospital, rehabilitation,
Institutions, yeah.
all kinds of places. I think I even went to a like a psychiatric hospital.
Oh, I went to a bunch of mental wards, yeah.
So all over the place. And I did a lot of home visitations as well. So I get this case, and I wait, and I read the case, and I listen, and I'll just hear, this is yours. And then other times I'm just like, okay. And then I immediately send it out to the team, or sometimes I'll hear, oh, this is for Jesse. Got to send it to Jesse, and I would send it off to Jesse Altobello, so who's now a practitioner as well. But this case I heard to take. And so I called Joan, and right away she's like, I don't know who you are. How long have you been a practitioner? What classes did you take? Who were your teachers? What makes you think you could pray for me?
That's what she said.
That's what she said to me. Hardcore. I was like, I felt like, and it was what a gift she was to me. What a gift, especially coming off of graduating and going through oral panels and, praying in front of the congregation, 1,000 people, just what a gift she gave me, just threw me into the back seat, And so I started at the beginning with her. I said, you want to know who I am? I'm going to tell you who I am. I'm going to tell you my story. And so Joan and I were on the phone a lot longer than I ever spend with anyone on the phone. That's a case. So I told her my whole spiritual healing, how I came to Agape, the healing that happened, and the journey. And by the time I was done with my story, I could hear her as I'm telling her. She's just weeping in the background of the phone. And I was like, well, that's my story, and I am willing to pray with you. I would love to have the opportunity to pray with you. And she was like, yes, pray with me. Joan was always a little hard, a little rough around the edges. So prayed, and then I think it was probably the very next day she called, and she's like, well, I'm going to have this procedure, da 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 da. Next week, can you pray with me before, and I was like, sure. So, and I do this often where the person will call me from after they get admitted or whatever, and they'll call me from that space right before they go. Because I won't stay on the phone with anyone after I pray with them. Anyone that's been a client knows that I start with prayer and I end with prayer and I hang up. And we can have a text conversation or a phone call later. So I called her when she, let me know. I guess she probably did text me. Don't really remember now. So I called her and she's like, okay, well, they confirmed, where they're going to go and do this and do that. And so I'm ready for you to pray. And, and then she's like, I'll call you tomorrow. And, when I wake up and all that jazz. I said, okay. So I prayed and I hung up the phone, peace and blessings. Bye. That was basically how I would end everything. And I get a call probably within 30, 40 minutes. And it's Joan. And I was like, and she's just sounded kind of frantic. I said, what's going on, Joan? She said, well, they got in there and it wasn't there, but it was there before we prayed. And it's not there. It's okay. So you've had a healing. That's wonderful. It's wonderful. It was never there. It was never there. And so for me, on my end, it was, that was just an out picturing of what is true and real, and that there's nothing that can come nigh the dwelling place of God, period. And sometimes it does show up like that. Well, a couple weeks later, Joan, one of her close practitioner friends found her. She had, I believe, had some sort of cardiac or stroke or something and passed nearly instantaneously. And so, we don't know what the prayer is for ever. We think it looks like something in the body, right? Sometimes. Was that the case? Or I don't know what Joan's healing was. Was it a renewal of her belief in the power of prayer, the God of her being? I don't know what that was. But she was, she's eternal, but she's not in that body anymore. So that was Joan.
And here, there was this incredible demonstration in accordance with our highest hope, and yet she still died.
The body passed.
The body passed.
The body passed.
Yeah.
The apple falls from the tree and disintegrates, right? But the life that is the tree that creates the apple is always the life. And so Joan's life is that life that is everything, that embodies everything. So that's Joan. What other one do you want, Reverend Victoria?
I think maybe, do you guys want to hear another story? Ricky's story.
Okay. So with Ricky, another case that came through, and I took this case because his brother was my prayer partner in my very first prayer class with Reverend Greta. And so I really wanted to be the one that went to support Ricky and his brother. And Billy was the one that had asked for the prayer support. And so Ricky wasn't really part of Agape. And that's another thing. You know, a lot of times people will, even today, call me and say, well, will you call my mom and pray? I need your mom to tell me that she wants me to pray with her. So this was kind of a little gray area for me. So, and Billy knew that, and he's like, well, I'll be there with you, and you could pray for me. I said, okay. So I go, and so I get there to the VA hospital, and I pray myself in, as I always do. Don't go into any, I don't go to pray with anyone without praying myself in first. Because I know that if I'm walking through an institution and I'm seeing things of the institution or whatever the condition is, then I'm not of service. I'm in the boat. So there are many times where I turned around and went right back out to the car and sat until I was moved to walk in truth. Okay. So I get up in there in the room and I introduce myself, and, you know, do some little chit chatting, and I said, you know, tried to feel around. Turns out he's Catholic, and I was like, oh, you know, I was born into Catholicism too. And, you know, so we, you know, had that little bonding moment. And so then I prayed. And this case was particularly interesting because nothing about wholeness came out. And yet this man seemingly was having massive physical challenges, but nothing about wholeness or health or vitality. None of that came out. What came out was a prayer about love. Love. And what was interesting is we were holding hands, and at the very end of that prayer, he said something about, you know, in Jesus' name, amen, or something like that. And this became a pattern with him. So I went to, as I was finished, because like I said, I always say, once the prayer's over, I'm gone, right? I'm going to leave you in that field. That's my intention, is to leave you in the field of truth. And so I said, okay, I'll be back next Tuesday and we'll pray again. And he reached out and grabbed my left arm, and he said, you should know that those things that you said about love are not me. I'm a horrible man. I've done terrible things in the military. I've avoided paying child support. I've been horrible to my wives. I've been a terrible brother. I'm not that. I'm like, that's okay. I'll see you next Tuesday. And I, you know, took my arm and left and came back next Tuesday. And we go through this dance. It went on for about 9 months. And in that 9-month period, Ricky would get better and he would go home, and I started seeing him at Agape with his brother Billy. And, you know, he'd be in and out, and then I'd always get a phone call, oh, Ricky's back in ICU. And, you know, Ricky always finished the prayers, and his endings got even more elaborate, sometimes even cutting me off before I could finish. You know, he'd just jump right in there and take over, which was, you know, it's fine with me. And so I get a call, I think it was pretty late, and it was like, you know, it was like all the others, but this seemed different to me. You know, this is it, you know, you need to go. And I had heard this before, and I was like, all right, I'll go. So I go, and it's like the wee hours of the morning. It's very quiet, go into ICU, and go into his room. It's very dark in there, and there was just a stillness in the room. And so I sat with him, which I had never done before. I just sat with him and, you know, turned within. And then I all of a sudden felt moved to pray. So I got up, went to the bedside, grabbed his hand as usual, and began to pray. And as I completed the prayer, I realized that Ricky didn't jump in on that prayer. And so I turned to leave very quietly, and he grabbed my left arm again. And he said, you know what, Michelle, I get it. You're right. I am love. I am love. And in all the time, and Ricky transitioned that night, later that day. He made his transition. And in all that time, the only person I had ever seen in his room was his brother, Billy. And that was maybe once or twice. There was never anyone else. And so then, I get a call, that we're doing a memorial for Ricky at Agape in the large conference room. And, it was interesting because, he just really didn't, there was no one that ever showed up, and he didn't think that he had anyone. And yet Victoria and I got there, and there was a room full of people.
All these ex-wives and everything.
All these people that just loved him, that loved him. And I was like, well, there it is. As soon as he owned who he is, it outpictured, and I just felt him there that day. And
That
so
was the healing.
and is that the healing? I don't know. Again, who am I to judge what the healing looks like? I am not. I am only a vessel for speaking truth and articulating truth. That is my job. My job is not to make someone feel better. Okay. My job is I'm not ever going to create a healing in anyone. That's not my job. My job is solely to treat my own mind about the condition in front of me, to treat my mind with truth,
to change it. Yeah.
That's my job. And that's what I do every single time.
And the only way to really do that job well is to be so filled with it. You fill yourself with this. You have a practice. You read, you meditate, you speak the word. Our devotion is to a God so infinite that besides it, nothing exists to be destroyed or eliminated, is the quote. Yes. Thank you, Michelle. Dear Lynn.
Okay, I have a question. Obviously, my hand is up. Okay. First of all, hey, Michelle, good to see you.
Good to see you, love.
And so I really have two questions, but I'm going to give you one question. So this question is around, and I kind of thought about it when Reverend M was talking about unification. Okay. So unification, that's unifying myself. I'll speak for myself. It's unifying myself with God. What I discovered when I first came into the teachings was that there was a big reluctance for me to unify myself with this concept of God, because from my lived experience as I'll say an African American growing up in the United States, there's a part of me that's saying, well, God doesn't love me, and why would I unify with this power, especially coming from the Christian roots, because I grew up in a Baptist church, right? So how can I reconcile? How can I heal that relationship? And if it's not healed, if I don't recognize it, would that be a barrier for me to really reach that unification step, right? Because remember, it's all about me treating my mind. But if there's that wrong concept about God and what God allowed to happen, not to just me, but to people that looked like me for many, many years, and it's still vestiges of it now, how do I reconcile that with unifying and feeling that oneness with God?
So the first thing that we have to do is we have to get a personal relationship with God. Okay, we have to develop our own personal relationship. And what does that look like? I think it looks like creating a pros and cons right away. So, in race consciousness, the biggest The biggest God in race consciousness is a white man in the sky with a beard with an anger management problem that only really likes other white men with beards, and they probably have lots of money. You know, I mean, there's a whole lot around that, right? And
Do you
so
mean pro and con? Do you mean God is not?
that's right. God is not. So what can you get, you know, when you think about God, how do you identify God? What characteristics, what qualities do you attribute to God? If we get outside of this, this is where the whole gentrifying, we got to get away from it. Got to throw away. I mean, how arrogant is it to say he or she?
Here's a good PowerPoint.
As if God only created us here on planet Earth, right?
Right.
So, you know, we have to get away from that. So we want to really start turning to qualities, you know. Maybe God is that moment when you were sitting with your grandma, you know. I remember sitting with my grandma and snapping beans for her. You know, that was a big God thing for me. You know, I don't know why I felt so much love, but I did. And so there were experiences that were important to me that I could tap into. And that was like, okay, well, what was that experience with grandma? That was love. That was connection, right? That was a divine relationship. So we have to begin to articulate and change the way that we think about God, because a lot of us, if you've grown up in any kind of religious dogma, there's been a lot put on you, especially with the word sin. Okay? Throw it out. It just means to miss the mark. All right? And what do you do when you miss the mark? If you're in archery, you shoot again. You pull it back and do it again. You know, so we have to just really break away from all that religious dogma, because again, a lot's been put on us from early childhood, and that's a lot to break free of. And so creating this list like Reverend Victoria has had there, that's really important to do.
Yeah, you're inventorying the concepts, and then you're kind of also inventorying some of these new ideas we've been giving you.
Yeah, and so if you have the God is and the God isn't, when you see the God is and you're reading Joel Goldsmith, Thunder of Silence, and you hear him say something about, you know, love and sustaining and maintaining, you're like, well, that's what I resonate with that. Now you can start to put other language around it. So we want to try to remove, I won't say throw away, but remove these negative ideals that that don't belong to us.
Concepts.
Yeah, they don't belong to us, but we have to weed them out, because they're weeds in our consciousness until we pull them out. You know, and can you say God is love and fake it till you make it? Yes. You want to get there faster? Start doing your weeding, right?
You know, and I did say last week that you can pull weeds and pull weeds and pull weeds, you know, but also if you grow grass eventually chokes out weeds. But but the metaphor of pulling weeds is really like we're using nature. You know, she's talking about doing the rich cleansing of the soil that is your subconscious mind. In Science of Mind, you would learn that there's these three aspects of the Godhead: spirit, which is causation, and then there's the subjective medium, which is soil. The spirit is the seed, the pure potential, the direct causation. The soil is the subconscious medium, which is you. You are this incarnated vessel of power, of the subconscious medium that has this power to co-create. And then the third aspect is this physical reality, the fruit, the material, what the matter that shows up. And so she's talking about do the work of cleaning the soil. Sorry, I wanted to expand on that. That's important.
Yeah, it is important. And, this is one of my favorite, from Art of Spiritual Healing. I imagine that Reverend Victoria will have you maybe read something out of it. This is what Joel says. Spiritual healing is accomplished only by an actual God realization. He's talking about spiritual healing, okay? Is accomplished only by an actual God realization. It has nothing to do with the names of people or with the names of a disease or condition. It has to do with knowing the true identity of those who are appearing to you as patients. As a practitioner, you have no right to be interested in the name of the patient, the name of the disease, or its diagnosis.
Yeah, what is that do anyway?
That's going to do nothing. Who cares? Who cares? Facts change. What you're going to articulate is truth, and that truth never changes.
Which is why when we say, like, in maybe these group meetings, you would never ask somebody, how's that condition going?
Right.
Right. Thank you.
And if that happens, if you pray with someone and then 2 weeks down the road, you wonder, I wonder how so-and-so's doing.
Go pray.
Uh-oh, guess what? Ernest Holmes says that's stop, drop, and pray right there. Right in that moment. That's a new prayer.
Interesting.
Yeah. Thank you, Michelle, because I did find that when I came into the teachings, I needed to do some weeding, right, to get things out of the way to really make that space.
Absolutely. When I came into the teachings, I was very injured by this idea of a male God.
Me too.
And I would have to, when I read A Course in Miracles, or even Joel Goldsmith or Ernest Holmes, whenever I saw the word he, I would have to change it to she. And then it dawned upon my consciousness that I was putting this physical sexual identity on this thing that is infinite and eternal, right? So that was when I was like, oh, I got some work to do here, because we're not talking about a he or a she. And we get to a point to where in our articulation that we can recognize divine masculine qualities, divine feminine qualities within God. Okay? They're qualities. Okay? They're not that personification of male and female. And that was, thank you for saying that, Geraldine. That's exactly what happened to me with the he God. I just went the opposite direction, which was absolutely not serving me and probably stalling me on my path.
Zara.
Thank you. One of the questions I have, where I'm feeling, maybe I'll just say how it is for me, is as much as I believe in all of this and I have a knowing about this, there's something that keeps me from not knowing it all the time about myself. It's very difficult for me, and it's maybe my, for whatever reasons, that I'm like holding the principles for myself, that I am made in the image and the likeness, and that abundance is for me. And so when it comes to me, all of a sudden it's like, I don't know, like, you know what I mean?
Yes, I do. And I think it's the deepest part of us, and that I don't think you're alone in that. And many people will advise you, if you're in the Pratt track, to use techniques to pray for yourself from third person and this and that. And I gave you an example of one of my prayers from 2003, which was very metaphysical. And the whole prayer was an affirmation. I am this and I am that. Remember, I read that to y'all. And, the reality is, for me, and Michelle can speak to it, is that that's really the deepest part of the journey, is that I'm always having to bring this always back to what, what do I know about who I am? And my own self-forgiveness, my own love of self. It's like transformation or awakening or evolution. It happens in these cycles, And I don't always have this. I'm not always in this place personally in a cycle where the focus is really on that part. But when you first enter this work, that's really because you are coming from a lifetime, maybe if you're like me, of indoctrination of your original sin, guilt and shame and otherness and, fear. So it's a lot. Michelle, what do you want to say?
I think that the personal self is where the rubber always hits the road, because even if we have all of that worked out and we're okay not being Catholic anymore and we're okay on the path, we're still walking around in this bio super suit, right? And you wake up and your hip hurts, or you go open your checkbook or whatever it is. There's all these things all of the time that are trying to inform otherwise, right? And they're not going to inform when we have, and this is where embodiment is so important. This is where having a spiritual practice is so important. Sitting in the silence. If you don't like the word meditation, call it something else. Close your eyes, sit down in the quiet, and turn within and listen. Listen. And just be present. And if you start making a grocery list, circle back around, keep listening, because the walking around, myself walking around as Michelle, there's always things informing. And if I'm not walking in truth, and that happens by right of consciousness, it's not going to happen because you took a class. Okay. It's not going to happen because, you just decided to do this or that. It's going to happen by right of consciousness, which means a devotion, a devotion to your own self, right? Because even if, like, Geraldine calls me for something, she's coming out of my own perception that her issue is my issue. It's all personal. If I'm seeing someone in the grocery store with an issue, I'm seeing it. It's all personal, and how do I walk through the world? You got to do that, a foot in two worlds, 1 foot in truth, 1 foot there, and be gentle with yourself. Because all you got to do is turn just this much, and there's grace.
And recognize your foot in truth. That's like a new idea, maybe. I don't know how long you've been taking classes and studying, but I mean, I've only been studying New Thought since 2002, and I mean, my foot's in truth, but it's like, I still got to anchor it. And when she says right of consciousness, that is a very important term, maybe, or word or phrase to understand, because it's not a right of, you get a certificate, you took a class, you can say some words, you learned how to plagiarize. It is basically to the degree that you can comprehend and understand the non-dual absolute nature of this thing that is the only power. And only to that degree that you understand it, that you can close your eyes and say, there's no causation there, there's no power there. Only to the degree that you understand where there is power, is that going to translate into a demonstration. You can't argue there's no power there if you're not rooted in where is the power? What is the power then? I'm teaching you some things to say if you want to argue, but again, the argument, you go back up. The argument is in the recognition and the unification.
Those are the most important 2 steps of prayer. If you only ever do those 2 steps, that's the most important. If you've ever gotten a prayer back from that you've submitted, and I've said something about spending more time in recognition and unification, that's it right there. That's it. Because if you didn't, what's going to happen when you get to realization is now you're going to just start making stuff up. Reverend Victoria is healthy and whole and knows her back is perfect.
I claim health and wholeness for Victoria
you're just
now.
Gonna make stuff up, because you're not grounded in truth.
Victoria's rooted in health. It's all
So
good. It may, it's a pep
good
talk.
intentions. That it is a pep talk. It's something that she could pay a motivational coach to help her with if she wanted to go down that road.
We're not coaches, y'all.
No, this is not a journey for a life coach. This is
not life coaching, that's for sure.
Practitioner.
Go do a life coach program.
Different program.
This is way, way different. And Joel would say, do anything else.
He says it in here. He tells you
other than this.
If you don't want to do,
if you're looking for work, if you think this is a career, like do something else.
On this journey, you're not going to be able to unknow what you know. So, already now you can't pretend that you don't know what you already know.
Which is why we don't shine the light in a dark eye. We don't shine the light in somebody's eyes who's been in the dark. It hurts.
And by right of consciousness, you will draw people unto you.
That's right.
Because people want to be in truth. They want to experience truth. They want to know that there's something that never ever fades away, something that is eternal. And so when you do this and you do this work and you're devoted to it by right of consciousness, you're going to find yourself in a field of those people that are doing the same thing or wanting the same thing.
And the recognition and unification steps are your articulated understanding out loud, especially if they're listening, of your right of consciousness. You're basically saying out loud, this is how I understand power and truth, and this is how I understand myself and you. And when they hear that come out of you with the fire of love that you have for this presence that has revealed itself to you and healed you and lifted you and proved itself to you, and you have this relationship with this power, and this listener is bearing witness to what you know about it, your description of it, and then their description in relation, they can't help but relax and think, oh God, thank God. I don't know what the hell he's saying, but he knows what he's saying. And I can just have faith in his conviction. I'll just rest and listen And when they can have that, then that quantum entanglement can happen, or I don't know what you want to call it, but suddenly there's an agreement, the subconscious minds or the spirits or whatever.
And I would just, invite you as you're practicing this prayer, you have your prayer partners. Don't wonder if they feel better or if they received it, or don't do that. Don't do that. It's you have a prayer partnership. This is what I'm asking prayer for. Okay. What are you asking prayer? I'm asking for this. Do the prayer, and hang up. And when you hang up, hang up. This is not about, well, I hope Geraldine felt better after that prayer. I wonder if she thought it was good enough. No, we're not doing that. If you find yourself doing that when you hang up with your prayer partner, sit your butt back down in the chair and pray again.
Who does this? I mean, think about this. I think it's wonderful to have this. I'm so excited,
It's true, though.
Who talks about this?
It's amazing.
What kind of person is interested in learning how to speak a spell for somebody's healing? That's deep stuff, y'all. It's very special. Well, I'm sorry we didn't practice out loud, but having Michelle is a gift. And now I'm going to ask each of us to name a quality that we would like to call forth for ourselves, just so that we can put them in the field. Michelle's going to pray a 6-step prayer for us. She might feel or hear some qualities, whatever, but we're going to at least put our quality out there, and then she'll say the word. So, okay, I'll just call on you. Have your quality, unmute yourself, say your one quality. Geraldine, you get to go first.
My quality is peace.
Rev M.
Wholeness.
What is it?
Darlene. Wholeness.
Wholeness. Thank you.
Darlene.
Harmony.
Harmony. Timothy.
Peace.
Susan.
Divine expression.
Kim.
Transformation.
Vanessa.
Truth.
Joshua.
Freedom.
Nicole.
Abundance.
Zara.
Prosperous.
Moonme, if you're there.
Wholeness.
Kara.
Grace.
And for me, freedom.
Okay. All right. And so how grateful I am for each one here. I'm so grateful for their yes to walking this journey, this thing called life. I'm so grateful for whatever it is that had them be in these particular seats this evening. And I'm so grateful for whatever seed of truth is already taking root in their consciousness. I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful for this conversation. So grateful to know that there are people that are wanting to have this conversation about prayer, about truth. And so from this place of gratitude, just recognizing Mother, Father, God as this divine presence that's never in absence, that's the fullness and allness of itself all of the time. This omnipotence as the only power that knows of its own name and nature. And it's an omni-activity that is ising all of the time, simply because God is ising all of the time. It never waxes or wanes. It's always the full and complete expression of itself, because it's already the full evolution and the full expansion of itself. And it's omniscient, an all-knowing creative intelligence that only creates out of its own reality. It creates out of a reality of unconditional love. And it does so without any sense of withhold whatsoever. It is the entire kingdom of heaven. It leaves nothing out. It is peace and wholeness and harmony and divine expression. It is divine right action and truth and freedom and abundance and prosperity. It's the law of grace. It's that which is transformative. It is in and through and all everything. It is infinite and eternal. It is that which permeates and penetrates all of life. And its only function is to sustain and maintain itself fully and
Yes.
completely. It sustains and maintains itself all of the time, all of the time. It never stops, never stops. The fullness of itself. And I know that I am one with it. I am made in its image and likeness. I am the one who sent me. I am the light that lighteth up every man, woman, and child. And as this is true for my life, I stand in my own spiritual authority, and I speak this truth for each one here within the sound of my voice. I know that each one here is a unique emanation of God, a unique individualized expression of God. God extended itself, put their face on itself so it could be itself through their divine and perfect life. And I know that all that God is embodied as all of these qualities right there within each and every one. Each one is one with this presence, the light that lighteth up every man, woman, and child. There's no separation here. And so knowing the oneness that is right here, right now, I know that this omnipresent, omniactive field of unconditional love, this field of peace that surpasses human understanding, this field of wholeness, health, vitality, zest, and zeal, this field of harmony, freedom, and sovereignty, this field of transformation, this field of truth that never changes, that is the same yesterday, today, and forever, this field of abundance, pressed down and overflowing. This field is seeking full expression in, through, and as each and every person here. Nothing left out, nothing left out. I know that the ground that each one stands upon is sacred and holy. And so all things holy are seeking full expression, full articulation in their life in every way. In every way, there's nothing left out where each one of these are. Love is seeking out each one. Health and wholeness is energizing each one right where they are. Abundance and prosperity overflowing is right where each one is. I don't know what all this looks like. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I know the knower that knows, and that is God. And God knows exactly what it's doing right where each one is fully and completely. God has their back because it is their back, and nothing can come nigh their dwelling place. And if it seemingly does, I know that it's dissolved into the nothingness in a holy instant. I don't
Yes.
deny anything that anyone may be going through, but I know that they are one with God, and that simply
That's
makes
right.
more than the sum total of their affairs,
Yes.
more than whatever is going on in their body temple, more than whatever's going on in the bank account, more than whatever's going on in a relationship, more than whatever's going on in their creative expression. These individuals are of God. And God knows exactly what it's doing right where each one is. And I know that as each one has found themselves in this room this evening, that something wonderful is seeking to emerge through their consciousness.
Yes.
Something wonderful is already growing and coming into bloom. And it's meant for each one uniquely as themselves. It's a gift. For each one here is a gift of God. And the gift of God keeps giving and giving and giving. It's the givingness of itself. And that givingness is coming into full form right where each one is, as the entire cosmos. All things possible consciousness right where each one is. All things possible consciousness. No lack, no limitation exists here. We're talking about all things possible consciousness. God consciousness right where each one is. The fullness and allness of this presence. It can be no other way. There's only one life. That's God's life, and that's the life of each one here in this room, here in this space. And I just know that wherever anyone finds themselves, that God is always right there. They are always in the midst of God, always in the midst of God. Where God is their perfect and precious life. This is the truth. I give thanks to know that I've spoken the truth. I release this word into a field of love and law, and I know that this love and law must fulfill itself, as it cannot and will not return void. And so it is. Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Perfect timing. Give her some love and hearts and all this. Put your number in the chat. Michelle is a licensed practitioner. If you want to, she's a great practitioner. Me, not so much. I end up just telling you like it is. But she has a really wonderful way of, doing it right. So, yeah. Love you guys. There's her number there. And I will send out the homework. It's got a little bit of information about your final project, and we're going to be really praying now in class. So please show up and cameras on, and let's really work the next 3 or 4 weeks we have left with each other, breaking through. And so that's my goal. And now I'll have the lecture and everything sent out. Okay. Peace and blessings. Thank you, Michelle, again.
You're welcome. It was
So
my joy to
grateful.
be with you guys.
Thank y'all.
Good to see you.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night. Bye.